Council meeting. Only one agenda item, which is the adoption of the Waitaki District Council annual report for the last financial year. So welcome to councillors and staff, to members of the public who may be watching this online, and of course to media. The item is, or the meeting is scheduled to go for about 30 minutes. I think that's hopefully on the high side, so we'll see how we get on. We have an apology for Councillor Percival. Do we have any other apologies?
Just an apology for lateness for Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. Okay, if someone like to move, we accept those apologies. And Councillor Thompson and Councillor Holding, thank you. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. And right, moving on to the decision report, item 4.1 on page 6, and hand over to Amanda Nichols.
Hello. So finally, we're presenting the annual report for adoption. We presented the 30 June 2024 results at the July PAR meeting, discussed the variances in that meeting, and hasn't been any significant change as a result of the audit process. So those variance explanations still stand. We have added the valuations. They were still being processed in July, so they have been added and audited now, and I've given a bit of a detail on the numbers in the covering report. Very significant increase in the Three Waters valuation. We hadn't revalued for 3 years. So yeah, that just reflects the significant prices that we've had to pay over that period. Unfortunately, we missed the legislative deadline, which was 31 October. Came very, very close. There hasn't been any changes since then. It was just last minute things, trying to get it all sorted in time, but we effectively were good to go on the 31st. So I take that as a win. The opinion has been modified. In the prior year, it was modified to do with the fair value assessment of the Three Waters. That's because we only value every 3 years. So in those intervening years, we did an assessment and came to the conclusion that it would have been a significant value, but because we didn't do the full valuation, we couldn't pin a number on it. So they qualified our annual report last year to do with that. This year, that qualification still stands for that prior year amount, because although we've booked the valuation this year, it is unclear like how much of that $100 million valuation movement should have actually occurred in the prior year versus this year. Like might have been 50-50, or like, who knows. So they've mentioned that in their audit opinion. And then some other minor things like the going concern issue of Waitaki District Health Services, which we talked about last week when we noted their annual report. We haven't had any significant issues raised by Audit New Zealand at this point. We're expecting a letter from Derek Olsen, the appointed auditor, shortly. But yeah, we haven't been advised of anything significant. We've just received the rep letter earlier, and that is just to do, there's one change that he's noted at the bottom of it, which we felt was immaterial to adjust. It's to do with some shareholdings that we hold in minor things that we don't fair value each year. We cost benefit, it's not worth revaluing. So he's just noted the potential fair value movement there that we haven't recognised. And I would really like to thank my finance team. There's a lot going on with the transformation and everything. So I just wanted to make special note that I'm really proud of the team, the hard work that they've done the last couple of months, pulling everything together for the annual report, and specifically Ian Wells. So he's been here, I think it's 16 years, is it? 16. And so he's done a tremendous job. Like I couldn't have done it without him. He doesn't come up on site anymore, but he has constantly been adding everything, all the audit requests to the audit dashboard, and it's going to be his last annual report. We're really going to miss him. So I really wanted to make a point of that. He's done an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But so councillors, any questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mick. These are, well, questions and comments, probably relating to the next annual report rather than these ones. But I just felt that the graphs on pages 18, 19 and 20, the debt affordability benchmark, balanced budget benchmark, and the debt control benchmark, particularly, might have warranted a little more explanation. I just think that they're potentially alarming, and I would have thought that we could perhaps have said a bit more, and perhaps to the extent that those benchmarks not achieved in those quite important debt and finance areas in future may arise again. I would request that, or suggest that we make some additional comment. I do think, and I think I said this in the notes when this material was in the review room, I think we've summarised the resident survey without indeed focusing, in my view, on the most important thing, that there is a low, in terms of public concern, the principal concerns were affordability, value for money, value from rates and so forth. And I believe that we've sort of, we should have focused on those rather than some of the other ones that we have focused on, which I think are more trivial. Can I also ask, there's a whole lot of stuff on water in the annual report on pages 66, 67 and 68. And a lot of those contamination targets or, water purity targets are reported as being not met. And when you look at the notes, in some instances, for the sake of argument with Elmaru, it looks as though the only reason it was that wasn't met is that for a brief period of time, a chlorine test wasn't done at a 1 minute interval. And I know in the case of Ohau, there's a reference to the fact that there weren't quite enough turbidity tests done. But the difficulty again is that it looks quite alarming. And I do feel the notes could have said the failures weren't significant, or the tests that were done did prove that everything was okay, or something like that. And my only other question is, there's a reference to the legislative breach on page 170. That being that we didn't adopt it by the 31st of October. What, if any, implications does that have?
Thank you for your comments. We can take that on board for the future if there is alarmist sort of breaches in those benchmark graphs. They are pretty standard, like they specify what colour to use even in the legislation. So we've done our reported as we are meant to, but we're happy to add comments where necessary if you think that's needed. We can take on board your feedback on the resident opinion survey. We have made some tweaks based on feedback from when the annual report was in the review room. And in terms of the water targets, it's like accounting is quite black and white. So if we go out in the annual report and say we're going to target this measure, we basically have to say achieved, not achieved. So that's our starting point. But yeah, we have tried to acknowledge in the notes exactly why it wasn't achieved, without going too far and fobbing it off sort of thing. So it's getting the right balance there that you can get through audit, but we can take that on board for the future. And in terms of the legislative breach, there is effectively no implication. We have self-disclosed it in our annual report, so therefore it doesn't get mentioned in the audit opinion, but it will be noted to Parliament. There'll be a bunch of council annual reports, and so there'll be a list that will go to Parliament. The Office of the Auditor General will advise what councils haven't met their legislative deadline. And I think there's been quite a few of them again this year.
Just a supplementary. That's because, but we didn't get there partly because audit didn't deliver its component or perform its role in due time. Is that correct?
A bit of both on both parts. There's a lot to get through at the end. Like obviously we still haven't received the draft audit opinion. They've still been working through that. There's a lot of things happening. CCOs like Waitaki District Health Services was later than ideal. So the audit was still carrying on right until, well, actually they were asking questions still this morning.
Thank you. And just note that Derek Olsen has joined us online. So if there's any questions for the auditor, welcome, Derek.
Morning, everyone.
Yeah, no, very good. Thank you. Right. We just have basically introduced the report and just taking some questions. Have you got anything you would like to add at the moment?
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, maybe just at a high level from our perspective, the opinion is still qualified this year. It's mostly relating to the comparative information relating to the movement of the revaluation. You'll be aware that the audit opinion was qualified in the previous, or actually in 2022, because of the revaluation, where the fair value did not agree to the carrying value within Waitaki District Council's annual report. So it was qualified in that year. And then last year it was qualified as a result of the comparative information in relation to that carrying value. But then this year, which is the final year of that qualification, relates to the movement through the OCI in relation to the revaluation of Three Waters and Roading of 2022. Other issues that we worked through this year, as you'll be aware, that there was an emphasis of matter at Waitaki District Health Services, an emphasis of matter relating to going concern. We did consider whether at a group level, an emphasis of matter also needed to be included. But after consulting, it was agreed that an emphasis of matter is not required for council. Also, we worked through issues with regards to performance information, specifically with your smooth travel exposure measure. So a lot of work was done this year in relation to that, because there's issues with the count information. But we were able to resolve that, and luckily that did not emanate in a qualification relating to the smooth travel exposure on your road condition. So in totality, there will only be the qualification, which is a carry forward of prior years, and hopefully that's, or it will be the last year of that specific qualification. Other than that, we did place a lot of emphasis this year on the revaluation that was performed on your roading and your Three Waters assets. And again, we were satisfied that those were appropriate. All the procedures that we performed indicated that the carrying value is in line with a fair value, or where they weren't, adjustments were made accordingly. So the figures that is reflected on the balance sheet is fair value as required by the accounting standards. So I think from our perspective, that's probably a high-level summary of the work that we did this year.
Thank you. Just a quick question for you. It's really around the process. So it used to be that as the audit team was getting through the process on the annual report, that the audit manager would meet with me. That hasn't happened for a wee while, and I thought it was happening with Simon Neal as chair of the park committee, but he says that he hasn't had those meetings either. Is that just something that was, was a practice that's been discontinued, or is there an ability to still have those in the future?
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, we did have meetings with the chair of the ARC as well as yourself during our planning phase of the audit to identify risks and issues. We still met with yourself and Alex during the planning phase of the audit. I did have a catch up with Alex prior to this meeting on Wednesday, actually, just to inform him of where we stand with regards to the audit. But again, it's part of our normal process to meet with those charged with governance as well as yourselves. So we can schedule those meetings, and it's the frequency of those meetings is dependent on yourselves, how frequently you would like to meet. In the past, we just normally met when we started the audit as regards to, or with regards to our planning phase, to ensure that we address the appropriate risks and issues that's top of mind for yourselves. Yeah,
no, okay, thank you. It's it's just a concern, obviously, when we've got to sign of these, that's, yeah, there's not something built into the process towards the end to, touch base. So yeah, that's all we're asking for, and would look forward to that in the future. As far as the process overall, with a bit of my mind on the bill that you sent, have you felt the process has gone well from our internal perspective?
Yes, I think from internal controls perspective, we're relying on internal controls. I think, again, a good relationship between ourselves and management. So we have been receiving information as and when requested. There were some hiccups throughout the process, but nothing that was unmanageable. I think, we were still gearing up to be in a position to sign last week, Thursday. I think from our side, we were ensuring that we have everything in place to be in a position to sign on Thursday. But again, we were informed that the meeting was deferred until this morning. So I think from our perspective, there is a good working relationship between ourselves and management. The information was forthcoming. It was uploaded on the dashboard. We were able to audit remotely, which I think is a big benefit from our perspective in terms of not having to travel, because it cuts down on our time that we are actually able to audit. So throughout that process, I think everything went according to plan.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for that feedback. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, it's just a statement more than anything. As Jim said earlier, yes, there are some alarms in the report, but also on that, I think we're aware of some of those, and those processes are starting to turn those around. I think the public themselves, or everybody that's involved, should read them, because it gives a very good and clear snapshot of the physical place of where we're at the minute. I know there's audit requirements and everything else, but if you can read through that, we're doing our best in a tough time, and I'd just like to congratulate the staff on the way they presented it.
Well, thank you, Councillor McCone. Any questions, Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, look, just one very quick one. I just had a look at the representation letter at the very end of the material. I hadn't seen it until this morning, to be honest. But I'm just looking at the very last page, Appendix 1, uncorrected misstatements. And there's something, there's a reference there, management explanation of why not corrected. I don't quite understand the graph above it anyway, but is this something we still have to write? What's this all about?
I think this is what Amanda referred to before, but
okay.
Go into that, Amanda.
Yeah, so we just received the rep letter about 15 minutes before the meeting. So we are just our explanation will be that it's just immaterial for adjusting. It's a fair value adjustment. We have shares in civic services and I can't remember what the second one, LGFA. And that we hold them at cost, how much we paid for them, and the auditors have suggested we revalue them to their fair value. There's no active market, so it's a bit unknown what that value would be. This is the value they've put on it, and we prefer just to leave them at cost, and it's more fairly represented.
Thank you.
So I assume is that the approach every council takes? It's a shareholder in both those entities, and if so, would it be possible for those entities to come up with a number each year?
Derek, is that something you could answer? Are you familiar with how other councils value those shares?
I think it's an issue across the board with all councils that they are carried at cost, because, like you've indicated, there isn't an active market. The accounting standards require those assets to be carried at fair value in line with your accounting policy, in the absence of which, that's why we're proposing it being carried on the representation letter, because it will be a misstatement. It's not a material misstatement, so it's below our threshold for qualifying on it. But it's probably something that, as the sector, would need to be investigated to see whether a valuation can be obtained from the relevant party.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no more questions, someone like to move the recommendation?
Just Simon coming in there. What? It's good. Is anything?
Sorry, just got Simon Neal joining online, just connecting at the moment. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, apologies.
That's all right. We're just, I was just about to ask for a motion. So, did you have anything you want to add on the annual report?
No, I just wanted to make sure that it had all been signed off externally.
Yep, good as gold. So yeah, the report and conveners had some additions this morning. So you see some of those. Right, Deputy Mayor Haley, you happy to move?
Happy to move.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Cowles, thank you. Any comments?
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow on from Councillor John's comments. Just a huge thank you to management for all the work that you've done, and also acknowledging Ian Wells as well. And thank you to our auditors for working really closely and successfully with our management team. Usually this should sit at management level, but thank you for keeping us informed in terms of where things are at. So happy to to go with this one. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put it, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. I think Deputy Mayor stole my thunder on that, but I do really appreciate all the work that staff have done, and know this is, it is quite a major process. Thank you, Derek, to you and your team as well. And yeah, it's good to get this one signed off. It is backward looking, and we want to be looking forward as much as we can, but it's a necessary part of the process to make sure that we know where we've been and what we've done, and accountable for that. So thank you very much. And if you can pass those thanks on to your respective teams, it'd be appreciated. Okay, with that, we come to the end of the meeting, so I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone who may have joined online, and we will close this off and continue on with our brief